New Landing's Job Chat is brought to you in part by the Prosperity Advisory Group, the next step in your financial future, and by the EBS Group with an unparalleled background in Oracle solutions and services.
Tax season is going to be here soon, and if you're unemployed, there are some things you need to know before you go and file. What are they? You'll find out today on Job Chat. My name is Hector Silva. I'm your host. Our guest today is Kimberly Sheahan. Kimberly Sheahan is a certified public accountant with House Park Dobratz, a firm with a 21-year history. She specializes in taxation for corporations, partnerships, and individuals, taking her clients from chaos to clarity while educating and empowering them to be smarter business owners and individuals. While she started her career focusing on bookkeeping, payroll taxes, and individual taxation, her current emphasis is in corporate and individual income tax. Working in each of these disciplines has given Kimberly a well-rounded background that allows her to address a wide range of the needs of her clients. She also developed a niche in representing clients in front of the IRS to resolve complex tax controversies. She advises on entity selection, annual tax planning and strategies, and new federal, state, and local tax laws. Kimberly is a member of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and Missouri Society of Certified Public Accountants. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me.
Kimberly, unemployed does not mean that you don't pay taxes.
Unfortunately not. It's probably the worst day in most people's lives, but come the next April, you still have to file a tax return. Usually you have a W-2 from your last job. And then in the event that you're looking for a while, it can take time, but you still may have the unemployment income, which was not taxed when it went in, so therefore must be taxed when it comes out. And a lot of people are unaware of these things, and it can be a shocker.
So you would suggest that records be kept during this time?
Records should always be kept.
Okay. I stand corrected.
But especially during this time. But there's actually quite a few things that exist in the tax code to help people who are looking for jobs so that you can have some extra deductions and some extra help instead of being hit as much. And also because your income tends to be lower, you have there are more opportunities available to you because a lot of things in the code do what we call a phase out, where once your income gets so high, you lose any benefit. And a lot of these things come back in for you if your income is lower.
So just like there are some special things that upper 10% can do, there are things that are specific to unemployed that are to their benefit.
Yes. And a couple of those things, one of the big things is if you're looking for a job, you can actually write off some of those expenses. The resume writing, the help you get, if you go have someone help you professionally write a resume, that expense, you can actually possibly write it off. We have what's called a 2% limitation for this item. And that's where a lot of people hear the words itemized versus standard deduction. This gets into the itemized world. Within the itemized world, there's another limitation, which is called our 2% limitation. And for this, there's the number on the front page of everybody's 1040, and it's the word every CPA is going to talk for nonstop about, which is your adjusted gross income, or AGI. And so the big number is 2% of AGI. So you go to that very bottom number on the front page of your 1040, you take 2% of it. Anything over that, if you're itemizing, you can have deductions. And that's where the resume help works in for that. If you're traveling for work or to find a job, you have to travel. Say you're looking out of town for a job and you have to fly somewhere. You can actually write off some of these expenses because you're in search of a new job. So
not specifically traveling for an interview,
right?
But actually traveling just in your job search.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and if there is, especially if it's for an interview, but if you're traveling to go look at employment centers in a different city.
So again, if you're traveling to Hawaii to look for a job, how do you differentiate?
That's where the record keeping really comes in. So say you decide you want to move to Hawaii, and that's where you're going to have your job. That can get a little iffy, obviously. The IRS is going to go, why did it have to be Hawaii? So at that point, you can write down, it's like, well, this is where my career path is because I'm in this specified field, so going to Hawaii is the most reasonable. And then I had to travel there for interviews. And generally, if you're doing vacation time on top of that, you would allocate a percentage of, okay, well, this part was dedicated to job search. I went and had this interview. I did this, and just kind of have a record, little calendar. Here's what I did while I was there and how it related to my job search. And then you just keep that record for about 7 years is the safe bet.
Right, and I imagine that's information you would need when you stand in front of the IRA.
Yes. Yeah, that is the point where the IRS comes to me and goes, okay, we disagree with this.
They'd never do that.
No, never do that. I actually had a client because of their record keeping that the IRS, we were disagreeing on about $1.8 million of income, and I was able to back up with records. No, this was not income. This was a bookkeeping error that was missed, and it helped save the client tons of back taxes. And it's all about those records. If they didn't have them, I couldn't have proved.
So record keeping is number one.
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's say it's not Hawaii and you're just going to look local and you're going to be traveling in your car quite a bit. How about mileage?
Mileage is deductible as well. So you just keep a record of how from home to the point of where your job interview is and looking for, they like contemporary record or contemporaneous records, which is kept at the time it happened, not a year later you wrote down, oh, I happened to go here. And today's technology makes that a lot easier. There's actually mileage apps you can get on your phone, or you could just go Google it and keep a record, a printout that says, I drove this many miles. The best thing is to buy a mileage log and write it down in your car, but about 1% of every person actually does that, so...
Well, but as long as you keep some record.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And the more handwritten, the better it is, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would that be?
They're just not fans of the spreadsheets yet. It's like if you go home and you write it down in a spreadsheet, the IRS gets a little finicky and they don't like it as much. They like to see that you wrote this down at the time. It wasn't backdated. It wasn't backed into and created. It was something that you kept when it happened. And you wrote down what you did while you were there. And that wins a lot more in an audit case.
Interesting. When you lose your job, of course, if you're lucky, you have that 401k sitting there. And you haven't paid anything in taxes on that. What happens then with taxes off of that if it's rolled out or not taken care of properly?
If it's just a rollover to a different account, as long as you there's timing limitations where you just have to make sure you get it back into a new one in a specified time and manner, and then there's no taxes, no anything. It just goes and lives on until you take it out. But if you have to do an early distribution, which is if you are under 59 and a half, at that point it's considered an early distribution. And if you are taking it, they get really finicky on this one, and they want you to keep that retirement. So you can get hit with a 10% penalty on this amount you take out unless it is about 10 specific different reasons why you took it out. And those different reasons are if you have unreimbursed medical expenses. So some people, they may be unemployed because they have medical issues. And that's where that AGI, adjusted gross income number, comes in again. If you have to have over 7.5% of that in medical expenses that are unreimbursed by any other company, insurance, etc. And at that point, you can deduct, or you cannot get hit with that 10% penalty on that money you took out for that reason.
So if it's an illness you pick up while you're unemployed, then that kicks in from the time that it's diagnosed, or?
Just any medical expenses you have.
Just any?
Yeah, as long as usually the reason you're taking from your IRA is because it's a significant expense, and it's for you and your dependents, spouse, not just yourself, but if you're taking it out because your child unfortunately is ill. And it's any medical expense related to someone listed on your specific tax return.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people go quite a long time before they get another job. Mm-hmm. And they may have to go into that savings for living expenses.
Living expenses is the one where, unfortunately, if you're taking that money, you're probably going to be hit with that penalty. But one of the ways you can avoid that is they have what's an annuity form. So this is where you'd have to talk to an advisor, make sure it's structured very specifically. But you can take out, instead of just taking a lump sum distribution, you'd have to do an annuity. It has to be over specified amounts for specified number of years. And then that way you can have it for the living expenses and avoid that penalty. But you will have to keep taking it. So even if you get a job, you have to still take that money out to stay within that time frame and the amount. Otherwise, it'll get backdated penalty. So if you go 3 years, and I believe it's at least a 5-year thing. If you go 3 years and then you stop taking it, you can go backwards and get hit for those 3 prior years with that 10% penalty.
Just because you stopped.
Yes.
So once you start, you better get it all the way through.
Exactly. So it's one of those things, that's why you really have to talk to an advisor and the CPA and make sure all your ducks are in a row, because that can be a very expensive error that can happen.
How about if you need to do something to the house, buy, build, do something with the home?
That is one of the things, but it's very specifically your first home.
Okay.
So it can't be moving houses or any of that.
Buying a summer place.
Yeah, exactly. But you can also, in addition to building houses, is your higher education expenses. So if you need to go back to school, then you can take it out. And that's not just the tuition, but your books as well. Any supplies you need if you're taking a very specific class that you have to buy, I don't know, say a graphing calculator for or something like that. Those would also, so as long as the distribution you take out is not more than those expenses, it also will avoid that penalty.
That also holds true if it's some sort of specific training?
It's qualified higher education, so it really has to be through a university-style setting. If you're doing a technical school, then that kind of training. If it's a more private training program specific to an industry, it can get iffy. That's the one where it comes down to each situation more, to how the training's being provided.
Does it have to be related to what your career has been up to then, or could it be something brand new?
It can be something brand new in this case, that you're looking for a new job. And there's also some other, if you don't qualify for this, you have some credit potentials as well, but this is the only way to avoid the 10% penalty.
I've heard the term qualified reservist distribution. What does that mean?
If you are in, say, the Army Reserves, and you get shipped off somewhere and you need some money to keep on living expenses, you can also withdraw and keep. That'll help maybe support your family if you're not making as much because your job you were at and you got shipped off for a year and you were the breadwinner. This can be a way to help keep your family afloat during that time.
So if you're unemployed but still a reservist,
yes,
then you can use that.
Right.
Okay.
Or even if you're employed and you get shipped off, you kind of might become unemployed,
okay,
or your job's on hold. That's one of those, I guess, that would be for no matter this.
Work either way.
Yes.
That's fantastic. When you're looking at all this, it sounds to me, when you're looking at all these different logs you have to keep and all the different and annuities and everything, there seems to be some strategy that has to play into this.
There's a lot of strategy.
Right. So would you suggest then, when you're starting this, to sit down with a professional?
Yes.
And map out that strategy?
I would. There's always, as I've said, as you've probably noticed in the last 10 minutes alone, I can go, well, if this, then this, and then if not, then this. That's the entire tax code. And it's always one of those, It depends. Every time someone asks me a question, I always go, well, it depends. I need to know about 50 more things before I can give you an answer, and then probably do some research because it's so specified, and there's so many ways, unfortunately, to trip up. Like I said, on the 50% or the 10% penalty with the 5 years and do this, and if you don't do, it goes backwards, and that's one of those areas where a lot of people, what you don't know can hurt you in this tax world, and a lot of times the potential of you actually getting audited is probably fairly low. But at the point that happens, if you don't have all this stuff, it can cost you a lot of money because they hit you with penalties and interest back to the time the money should have been paid. And due to how slow they are, it's going to be probably 2 to 3 years before they even talk to you. The IRS reaches out and says, oh, we think you had an error in 2008, and it's 2011. And so you have to pay penalties and interest if you did have an error or if you don't have the records to support why you did something.
So you're suggesting be more proactive than reactive?
Yes, because you can't recreate records down the road. And that's where coming in and talking to a professional can help you get that all going. Just have a quick hour chat with someone, say, this is what I'm doing. What simple advice can you give me to help make this easier?
There's no software package out there that does this for you.
Unfortunately, no. Software packages do what they deal with the very simple forms of tax, but when you're getting into planning and asking questions, it really can't field it. I'm not sure how their helplines are. Obviously, I know you can call in and consult people, but it's probably not going to be what you need.
Yeah, and again, we're talking reactionary because you usually don't use those until you're ready to file.
Right.
And from what I'm hearing you say is you lose that job, that's the time to sit down with someone.
Yes, that would be the time. Go and figure out, okay, I lost my job, and it could be 1 week to 10 months or more. What can I do to track all of my expenses? Where are my deductions? Because that's when you're really going to need them, those deductions as well. Lower that income as much as possible that you can legally. There's a lot of opportunities out there that nobody knows about because no one wants to think about that time.
We do have, unfortunately, people that have had to move into other people's houses, relatives or so forth. So, again, it's expensive to move, even if you do a lot of it yourself.
Yes.
But all of that, I imagine, would fall into some of these categories?
There's definitely moving rules. Of course, there's rules for everything. But yes, if you have to move for a job, generally if you're just moving while you're job hunting, that's not going to be deductible. But if you're moving because of the new job, so say you work here in Kansas City and you get a job in St. Louis, then all those expenses it takes you to move there. So the storage fees possibly for storing your items while you're transitioning them, the moving truck, traveling there to go look at the house, right. All of these different items.
But, and that's if you are moving because of a job. I'm looking more towards you're moving because you can't afford the house you're in anymore and you have to move in with someone else. But you're going to have to store things because you can't just move all of that into the other person's house. Yeah. You're going to have to crate things. You're going to have to spend money even though you're moving into someone else's house. You don't have a job. Are there any possibilities there?
It kind of depends on where your new job is. Unfortunately, there aren't any just for if you have to move because you can't afford it.
Okay, that was my concern.
Okay. Unfortunately, if there are rules where if it's within 1 year of that new job, so if you have to move into someone's house and that's where you're staying for a while and you get a new job, you could potentially fall into that within that time limit of being able to get it. Because there's some, if it's 50 miles or more away from where your old job was, so even if you're having to drive, say, from Olathe to downtown now.
But just a survival move because of your unemployment does not fall under any.
No, it does not.
Okay. If you wanted to tell people one thing that they definitely had to be careful of when they're unemployed, what would that one major thing be?
The one major thing. I think the biggest thing is watching the IRA distributions, because I know a lot of people touch that money, and when you're already hurting, getting that 10% penalty is going to be the worst thing that could probably happen to you, in addition to having to pay taxes on that income. So that's the biggest area where I've probably seen a lot of problems, that people reach for that money and it's not done right, and then they get hit with these penalties, and it's 8 to 9 months later and they don't have the money for it, and then now they're in debt to the IRS, and it just compounds the problems.
Well, listening to you, the one thing that comes to my mind from this side of the table is don't do it yourself. Don't even try to do it yourself. It's way too complicated, and there are too many rules in there that have to be followed, that you do need a professional to help you during this time.
Yes, that's the biggest thing, is always, in my world, a professional is going to be your biggest help. Anybody you can find that can really just educate you, just make you aware of anything. If you can sit down and grab someone's ear for an hour, that can be the best help to you. And a lot of people, depending on the professionals, may or may not charge and may just be willing to help you out if you can grab them. And just educational seminars are always going on that you can go to.
At the local colleges, and I assume none of this was, and none of these fees are covered under the tax laws, but it's a good investment.
Yes, it's definitely worth your time to get that little bit of education about these items and save yourself headaches down the road, because I know the scariest thing for many people is seeing one of those IRS letters show up in the mail and you don't know what to do with it. And that's the biggest time to call. If you get one of those letters, call help. Don't try to handle it on your own unless it's very clear what's going on, because most of the time those letters aren't. But a lot of times the IRS, they make mistakes too. So you may not even know it, and they're just going to assess you, and a lot of people pay it when they don't have to.
I wouldn't say they make mistakes, but then again, that's just looking over my shoulder. Kimberly, we want to thank you for spending time with us today, and it's definitely a subject that is important to the unemployed. If somebody wanted to contact you for more information or for help, where could they reach you?
My firm name is House Park Dobratz, and you can find us at www.hpdco.com, or you can reach me at 816-931-3393. And I'm not going to spell out my email for you because it's really long, but a phone call is probably the easiest way to get me. So 816-931-3393.
Fantastic. Thank you. You can hear more information and advice from Kimberly on another podcast. You can also catch these and other podcasts from other experts on www.newlandingsjobchat.org, or you can go to YouTube and just put in Job Chat. Until next time, may your days be full of health, happiness, and success.